didn't expect to give birth to 2 babies that day. One light, one dark, but when the nurse placed them in her arms, the room went silent, whispers turned into stares, and a decision was made that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. One child was taken home with smiles and celebration. The other was left behind, as if love had a color it refused to touch. Years later, fate brought them face to face again, and the truth about that day refused to stay buried. What happens when the past demands justice? Grace believed that love could protect her from the world's cruelty. She believed people would see her heart before her skin. But that face began to tremble the moment she walked into the hospital room. Doctors looked confused. Nurses whispered. She heard them say impossible and must be a mistake. Grace didn't understand until she saw the looks on their faces. Moments later, she gave birth to 2 babies, one with skin pale as milk, the other with deep, beautiful brown eyes that mirrored her own. For a second, everything stood still. Grace smiled, unaware that the room's silence was not awe but judgment. She didn't yet know how quickly love could turn cold, how society could split a family with a single glance. As she held both of her children close, she thought she'd given life to hope itself. But beyond those hospital walls, the world was already deciding which baby was worth keeping and which one wasn't. And in that single, ordinary morning, Grace's life and her faith in humanity were about to change forever.
The first sign that something was wrong came when the nurse avoided her eyes. Grace could feel it, an unease in the air, thick and heavy like a storm about to break. One of her babies was gently placed in her arms, the other was not. When Grace asked why, the nurse only smiled too quickly and said, "We'll take care of everything." But everything didn't include fairness.
Hours passed and Grace could hear distant murmurs through the thin hospital curtains. A doctor's voice, low, stern, saying words she couldn't quite make out. Complicated situation, best for everyone. By morning, only one bassinet remained beside her bed, the pale-skinned baby swaddled in pink, sleeping peacefully. The other, her son, was gone. Grace's voice trembled as she demanded answers, but her questions were met with silence and deflection. "There's been a mix-up," they said. "You need rest." Yet deep down she knew. The looks, the whispers, the quiet refusal to meet her gaze, it all added up. Somewhere inside that same hospital, her child was being treated differently, and she could do nothing but sit, weak and dizzy, as they decided the fate of her own flesh and blood.
When she was finally discharged, Grace left with one baby in her arms and a heart split in 2. They told her the other child hadn't survived. No birth certificate, no goodbye. Just paperwork stamped and filed away as if her son had never existed.
But the truth had a way of finding cracks to escape through. Weeks later, Grace overheard 2 nurses whispering at the grocery store. That white couple from out of town adopted one of the twins. The words hit her like thunder. Her knees buckled. The ground seemed to vanish beneath her. Grace tried to confront the hospital, but doors closed before she reached them. Records were misplaced, doctors were on leave. Even the sheriff, who once tipped his hat to her, refused to help. She was just a single black mother in a small southern town. Her voice carried no weight against their quiet corruption. Still, she didn't stop searching. Every night she sat by the window rocking her remaining child, whispering lullabies meant for 2. She clipped newspaper articles, wrote letters to state offices, begged for answers that never came.
And then, one night, she saw a photo in the local paper, an adoption feature showing smiling parents holding a baby with her son's eyes, that same tiny scar near his ear, that same dimple when he smiled. The caption read, "Miracle baby finally finds his forever home." Grace's hands shook so hard the paper tore. The world around her blurred. It wasn't just loss anymore, it was theft. And now she knew exactly who had taken everything from her. But how do you fight a system that was built to silence you? Still, something inside Grace shifted. She wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. She was a storm waiting to break. And as the town prepared for its annual fair, a celebration of unity and family values, Grace made a decision that would change everything.
The day of the town fair arrived beneath a blazing summer sun. Laughter echoed through the streets, music spilled from the speakers, and the air smelled of cotton candy and barbecue. But for Grace, it all sounded distant, muted beneath the roar of her heartbeat. She stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching that torn newspaper photo, her hands trembling. On the small stage ahead, the mayor began his speech, praising the beautiful families that make this town proud. Then they called one of those families forward. Grace froze. There they were, the couple from the paper, the same woman who had once smiled at her in the hospital hallway, pretending not to recognize her. And in the man's arms, the little boy with the familiar brown eyes. her son. The crowd cheered. Grace couldn't breathe. Every instinct in her body screamed to run to him, to hold him, to tell the world the truth.
But when she stepped forward, the air shifted. Conversations stopped, faces turned. And then came the murmurs, soft at first, then sharper, like blades. What's she doing here? That's not her child. She's causing trouble again. Grace's voice cracked as she shouted the word she'd been holding for months. He's mine! You took him from me! The mayor tried to calm her. The couple turned away, shielding the boy's face as cameras flashed. Security moved in, their hands gripping her arms, dragging her back through the dirt while she screamed his name. The boy looked up, confused, frightened, and for the briefest moment, their eyes met. Recognition flickered, a spark of something real. Then he was carried away, the fair's laughter drowning out her cries.
Grace fell to her knees, dust rising around her like smoke. Everything she'd believed in, the system, justice, even hope, had turned its back on her. But somewhere deep inside that pain, a fire still burned, because now the world had seen her. And sometimes all it takes is being seen for the truth to start burning its way through the lies. After that day, Grace was never the same. The town tried to pretend the incident hadn't happened. News outlets twisted her story, calling her unstable and confused. The couple moved away quietly, their new life untouched by the noise. But for Grace, silence became her only companion. She still walked past the hospital sometimes, the place where everything began. The same white walls, the same smiling staff. But she saw through it all now. The illusion of equality that had always been just that. An illusion. For years, she wrote letters to anyone who would listen, reporters, lawyers, even politicians. Most never replied. But one day, a small community group took interest. They began digging through records, uncovering adoption papers that didn't match, signatures that had been forged. Grace's story started to spread, first locally, then far beyond her small town. People began to ask questions. How many other mothers had been silenced? How many children had been taken simply because of the color of their skin? She never got her son back, not truly. By the time he learned the truth, he was grown, raised in a world that had erased half of who he was. But when he saw her again, standing at the edge of that same fairground years later, he didn't need words. Sometimes recognition isn't spoken, it's felt.
Grace didn't live to see justice done, but her story did something even greater. It opened eyes. It forced people to look at what they'd chosen to ignore. Her pain became proof. Her silence became a spark. Because racism doesn't always wear hoods or shout slurs. Sometimes it wears a white coat and smiles kindly while taking everything from you.
And now the question remains, how many more Graces will it take before the world decides that love and not skin defines a family?